So this week we're looking at what do you do with those little narrow odd pieces that end up on your layout. Here's how to turn it into just a piece of scrap ground. So scrap or waste ground is everywhere. Those little unclaimed corners of a diorama or a layout are easily filled up with just a little patch of mud or grass, maybe a bit of tarmac that's giving way to grass. It's just been left to go back to nature. If it's near the edge of the road, then the cars might have driven over it, leaving ruts. There might be the odd bush which nobody's cut back. It's basically a bit that somebody's forgotten. But it's really useful because it gives space to your layout or diorama, and the eye will glance over it and pass on to the more important parts of your scene. So, what do I want to do? Well, I've got this amazing road, it's not quite finished yet, and I've got this section here, and I'm like, need something doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on a bit of scrap ground, wasteland that you might find anywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a layer of glue down, a layer of grout, and then put some liquid glue on and just put down my base layer. Just to make sure it sticks well, I'm going to start with a layer of just craft PVA and put it along. And I'm going to use a slightly damp brush just to spread it out. And this just gives a base to the ground, and hopefully I won't need to put quite as much on then to, warp everything with water. So I'm just going to put this around. So as usual, I'm using tile grout. This is just brown tile grout, floor tile grout, anything will do. And this one's quite a grey colour. I often use a more browny coloured one. I'm not worried about it being particularly neat or tidy. I just need to build up the layer. Okay, that's it for now. And now I'm just going to take a brush, a dry brush, and just smooth it out and into all the edges. Next up then is gluing this. Now I'm going to spray it with some water, but I don't want to catch all of this here. So first I'm just going to tip all of that off. This is isopropyl alcohol and water, about, people ask how much, I just put about a third in of the isopropyl. With grout, you need to get it so it's damp enough to go in. And one of the problems you'll find is that if you don't put enough isopropyl in, it doesn't flow into the grout, and that just ends up with a bit of a mess. It just balls the glue on the surface, and it's not a good look. Okay, so when it's well and truly wet, it probably will need a bit more. And then I'm going to go around. This again is about a third glue to 2/3, just normal water. But the point is just to give the grout something to glue it. I absolutely flooded my grout to make sure that it stayed. Now, if you're on foam board, just be careful it doesn't warp. It doesn't matter on mine because I'm going to glue it solidly, but if this was your final base, you can end up with a little bit of banana effect. Once I'd done that, I then used it's just a dentist pick to create fake wheel ruts, because I wanted this to be quite a rutted, muddy original surface underneath that's dried out a bit and the grass has come through. Easy enough to do. You could use a HO car if you wanted. I just didn't want to get any of my mucky on this, and it's still very wet and damp when I'm doing it, which means that the ruts smooth themselves out a bit, which is the effect I was after. So next up on my scrap ground is doing some grass and bushes. I'm going to put the grass on first, then I'm going to do the bushes on top. So I've got some grass, loads of little bits in actually, and I've got my static grass machine. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to just put a little spray of water on so it conducts. Not a huge amount, just enough that it will conduct a little. And then at this point, I normally would put on some glue. So I've got tacky glue. This is tacky glue, and it's just a bit thicker than normal. And I want a sort of a mix of patches and just general grass. So I'm going to spread this out with a brush in a minute, but I'm just going to put it roughly where I want it to start with. So this is a knock grass master, and I'm just putting in some, this is hoovered up grass from other layouts, and it's got a mix of short and a mix of long, and I think it's important you have a mix. Grass isn't that even, and if you do it all with one, it just starts looking like a bowling green, which if you're doing a bowling green is perfect, but if you're not, then something else looks good. So this is a very manky looking screw that I just attach, and then I just sprinkle it on. But first I'm just going to put some paper underneath to catch the excess. So turn it on, plug it in and sprinkle away. Now I want some of the soil coming through. I think it's important to say that. I don't want this to look like pristine grass. So I'm not bothered if it looks a little bit patchy. If you want it to look better, you need to put more glue on really. I'm deliberately making this patchy glue. Next stage is hoovering it all up. Now, hoovering has two main aims. One is to pick up any excess grass that you've got there. Otherwise it sticks sometimes where you don't want it to. So if you've grassed onto your pavement, now's the time to get it off before it gets a bit too permanently attached. The second thing is actually to pull all the grass upright again. Although it's static, because it's not densely packed, it can fall over. And I always find a bit of a hoover sucks everything straight up and just makes it look a little bit perkier. Now at this point, if you want any details pushed in, now is the time to get them in so the grass comes around them. And you could put like empty tyres and things like that in HO scale, the odd bit of junk. Now I'm going to put a couple of other bits of junk on, and I'll show you how I do those now. So whilst this is still setting. So the first thing is I'm going to put some dandelions on. Now these are laser cut knock dandelions, and I've done a lot of water plants with these laser cuts. They're very good, probably a little oversized if I'm honest, but still I'm going to put a couple on just to get that feel. And you get two in the pack, and I'm going to cut out probably just 3 dandelions. I'm not looking for a huge number. So they're very simple to do. You literally just cut them out of their carrier sheet. So what do you do with these? Well, it's just a case of bending them. And they'd say use a pin. I'm just going to use a cocktail stick, and you put something in the middle and you just bend them around it to get the kind of shape that you want. And you want to make sure that your actual feathers end up right in the middle. So to stick those on, I'm just going to use a little dab of glue and my tweezers, dab of glue, and let's put them in place. So I'm going to put them across the edge where you might see them the most, and they've got to make sure that they do sit and they don't get pushed up by the grass. So years ago, I spent ages cutting up things like this. They're actually Toblerone wrappers, and they had a variety of colours, and you can do with everything. And I ended up with this sort of box of white paper, small paper, any sort of thing really that just looks dirty. There's a bit of tissue in there, all sorts. So what I tend to do is I just get a few little bits, and I just think it just catches the eye a little. And you sort of work them into the grass. You don't want hundreds, but a little bit flown along is never a bad thing. Next, I'm going to put on some leaves. Now, these are scrunched up garden leaves that I've got, probably an oak or something like that. And it's just to add a little bit more, just sort of texture. Again, not a huge amount. These are quite big. Just add something in that isn't there already. And the final thing I add in is chamomile tea. Now, I love chamomile tea. It's light, it's airy, it looks like leaves to me, so I just like to add it in to give a little bit of just extra. Now this all just looks punked on top at the moment, and that's fine. And if you want it to look more bedded in, you could easily do it before you put your grass on. But what I tend to do now is get my spray. Really smell from the chamomile tea leaves, which tends to knock things down a bit anyway, especially with these bits of, and there's any that are sticking up in a really bad way, just push them down. So the thing to do now is just to bed it in with a bit of glue. So I tend to just drip a little bit of glue around on these key areas to make sure they all stay in. And the thing it also does is it sort of runs it down into the surface. If you've waited for your previous set of glue to dry, then there's no danger of your grass being disturbed. Okay, and with all things, the trick is just layers. So if you're not very happy with it, you think, oh, that's a bit big, then take it out or do something else with it or move it. Oh, I don't like that piece, I'll put it over here. It is just about building up layers and layers of patina. And next up, once we've done all this, we'll put on just a little bit more height with a few small bushes. Time to add some bushes to my scrap ground. Now, there are so many materials you can use to make bushes, it's unreal. But I'm going to use this, it's rubberized horsehair, and I like it because it's quite dark, it's quite long. Sometimes you get these little curvy bits which aren't quite so good, but generally it comes out with a nice sort of, just quite a sparse, sort of branchy looking structure. And I use this a lot on my layout. It's cheap. You can buy this in almost every scenic, every train show in a scenery kind of stand in the UK. It's actually an upholstery materialised, rubberised horsehair. So I'm sure you can get it in other places as well. This one's, I've tried to spray it green, but it's basically some kind of rubbery cement and horsehair. Now I've got a friend who's highly allergic to horsehair, so she's not coming at my layout anytime soon. Now I don't want a lot of bushes, but I am going to do 2 or 3. And literally I just tease out some little scraps. Now the quickest, easiest way to do this is to buy something like this. This is Craft Mount. It's a typical spray adhesive. I just go on and type spray adhesive into search and buy it. So I'm just going to put these here and spray them. Easy peasy. Now what you need now is to just shake on some leaves. Now these are knock leaves. There are other makes. I also like Hecky. And the trick with using leaves is it gives just that little bit more detail. Notice I'm doing them over something so that in the future, should I want to, I can recover these leaves and reuse them. And I do reuse these a lot. So I've finished the bushes, just going to glue them in place. And that I'm just going to use tacky glue as normal. Just a thicker white glue. And I'm going to put a little splodge on there. I'm not going to put a lot on. And I'm just literally going to shove them up one end mostly. This is the final result. You can see there's a few bushes, bit of grass, bit of mud, a few ruts from these cars that keep sneaking on. Well, certainly a way to fill up a corner on your layout.
This week's adventures of the mini Cathys. N-scale Cathy finally gets her cars and trucks and bikes. Well, let's hope that's got it out of her system. Unfortunately, it may not be the last that we see of N-scale Cathy and moving vehicles.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, then subscribe to me on YouTube Alternatively, like me on Facebook, Kathy Millett Modelling, or on my website, kathymillett.co.uk. See you next week.